You okay? You doing okay?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. We'll chat sometime about where you're at with everything. So maybe we can set up a separate call just to make sure everything's going okay. Everybody else okay? Okay. Okay, so let's start with this new chapter, moving along. So we did a sort of review session of all the stuff we've done. There's an awful lot of nouns. You guys will get your sheets back. This week we'll also sign up for our language presentations, which we'll do Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So basically you'll stand up and you'll recite your... This Tuesday? No, next, okay. Sorry. Sometimes I don't speak everything that I should. Sometimes I start in the middle of things. Next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are your first language performances. And there are two things that I would like you to do. One is to stand up and to recite all of your words, all 12 of your words, without looking at any notes. You can certainly use the board if it helps. There'll be all kinds of things you can do. Basically, we broadcast our classes, but I don't broadcast when people are doing exams. So don't feel like there's additional pressure. We will have our video folks who are in the class tied in with us. They'll be able to communicate, but there'll be no record of the class anywhere. And I just prefer to do it that way, just because you never know what will happen when students have to stand up and sort of recite things. And then you'll do somewhere between a 3 to 5 minute presentation on some aspect of Tlingit language or culture. If you pick like culture things, that's fine, but I would like to just sort of you to be thinking about how language ties into it. Now it's a pretty wide open field. There's a number of awesome texts that are out there. The introductions to both of the Dauenhower books, the first two books they did on oratory. The first one is called Hashuka, and the second one is called Hatuwu Naguyis. They're both in the library. Another one is Sergei Khan's Symbolic Immortality. That's another wonderful text. And that, I believe, is also in the library. And then Tom Thornton's Being in Place Among the Tlingit, or the place name book, Hashishku Hasta Ani. I can't remember. Sauku? Okay. The Names on Our Grandparents' Land. The Battle of Sitka, Tlingit. Anushi Tlingit Anika. Russians on Tlingit Land. Wonderful sort of accounts in there. And then Under Mount St. Elias, and also by Frederica de Laguna, and the Tlingit Indians by Emmons and also de Laguna. Those are all really good sources. There's lots of stuff you could find in any of those texts. And you know, so I'm asking you to do a little bit of digging, to find some stuff, and then present it to us as a group. So it's not like necessarily a research paper as far as, you know, sources and things, but I would like you to sort of say where you went to look for things. And I would like to see that you put some time into this. And it's a way to just share some things that you can discover. Most of those have, you know, language concepts in them because all of Tlingit culture comes from Tlingit language. But, you know, and it's not like I'm expecting you to show us how something translates or anything like that. But you should show a little bit of depth of understanding of this. And I wouldn't want to see you stand up there and just read a story to us. Instead, if you wanted to sort of focus on a story, you could give us the very quick summary, and then you can talk about it. So you could just sort of give us a little bit more depth to it. There's a whole bunch of stories in the Hashuka book. There's also another wonderful text by Elizabeth Nyman and Jeff Lear. Gagi Uwakut, I think it's called. Gagi Art. They walked out into the open. That's what that translates to. And then the English title is Coming Forth to Reconfirm a Taka River Tlingit Clan, I believe. And it's also translated stories by Elizabeth Nyman and Jeff Lear. wonderful. All of those texts are just amazing. So spend some time with some of those texts. The De Laguna, I think, is probably in the library. That one you can also get online for free. So if you want to be a student of Tlingit, you should certainly have that on your hard drive somewhere. It's about 800 pages long. It's really huge. So any questions on that? Okay. Then also we've established some working pairs in here, I believe. So Thursday you can use any pieces of paper, anything you want to. You don't have to commit this from memory, but you just have to show me that you've chosen 6 phrases apiece, and you can put together a very short conversation, and you just stand up there and perform for the universe. Okay? All right. So move along. We've talked about pronouns, so we're touching on a little bit of grammar stuff, and then we're also doing a whole bunch of repetition. Do so, eh? Is that somebody calling me? Okay. I tried sending an invitation if you wanted to join us. Sorry. Okay, so we should get joining us soon. Sheesh. So we've been talking about pronouns, and so now we're going to do a series where we're going to watch the object pronoun and how it changes. So going through this handout, starting on page 55, there's a couple of concepts we're going to move through here, and this is how we develop a Tlingit sense of identity. And it's something very interesting. The students of there's all these interesting things with Tlingit. One, there's a whole bunch of people who are doing amazing artwork right now, but there's not too many who are doing artwork and language at the same time. But the ones who are, it's really interesting to watch how the language influences their art and the art influences their language. Some of the things about Tlingit identity is, one, you gotta be careful not to brag about yourself. And it's a challenge, right? Because as if you wanted to commit to being an artist for your life, then a lot of times you've got to go for grants and competitive opportunities where you've really got to sell yourself. But you're also taught not to do that kind of stuff. If you wanted a job, you're supposed to try and sell yourself, and you're taught not to do those things. So it's interesting. But as far as how you understand who you are is understood best in Tlingit by understanding who you're related to and what clan people belong to, and those clan histories. So those are some of the most important things. And then there's also just sort of personal conduct. I think about the things that were handed down in my family from particularly my mother's father's mother and my mother's father's father were two that really talked a lot about these types of things. And it's a sense of sort of having humility so that you're not walking around acting like you're better than people, but you're also not walking around acting like people are better than you. And so these are concepts that were really drilled in our family a lot. And the other thing is, if you don't know somebody, to be cautious of how you act and how you talk, because they might go and say, oh, this is how those people are. And everywhere you go, your clan goes with you. You represent your clan. And these are really interesting concepts, because if you just go somewhere and say you went to some other community and you just really acted a fool in that community, you could really disgrace your clan. So a long time ago, if you just went into somebody else's territory and started hunting, your clan could end up having to pay for those types of things. So there's other concepts here like balance, reciprocity and these things about trying to keep the world in a good spot. So we're gonna look at those things, and we're gonna learn how to talk about ourselves and also who we're related to. The next step after this is looking at kinship and Tlingit, which is it's fun. It can get complicated. It's a little bit different than other things, but we'll look at all those things. I had to redo my charts. I was really excited because it's all about what clan people are, and you know traditionally you marry your opposites, so you've got to keep the family, the genealogy line sort of in those thoughts. And I missed a certain area on the kinship chart, so I was excited to have some feedback and change. All right, it's page 55. Wasa edu wasak. Wasa edu wasak. Wasa edu wasak. And we are all going to be watsik for this exercise. The other thing is ye is interchangeable with you, but over the years I know I've taught and I've put more emphasis on the object pronouns. I'm trying to fix that these days. Watsik. Watsik. Watsik ye hatu wasak. Watsik ye hatu wasak. Watsik ye hatu wasak. Okay, next page. Oops. Can't find my mouse. So that's, you know, and to break it down, it's more like, how are you called? That's a good way to translate that first question. And then the second phrase is, I am called this, right? And then that's where you put your name. Wasakhattu wasak. Wasakhattu wasak. Wasakhattu wasak. How am I called? So the one asking this, now we're going to do khat, khat, khat. So if we're telling, we're still watsik, but he forgot his own name. So he says, wasakhattu wasak. What am I called? And you say, khat ye iddu wasak. Khat ye iddu wasak. So we see we went from khat to I. So we're just changing that. There's two pronouns right in a row there. Anybody know what they are? What's the first one? Khat and I. What kind of pronoun is it?
I mean,
well, yeah. So they have it. There's a type, right? So we did independent, possessive, and there's two others. It's an object pronoun, right? Followed by d. And d is what kind of pronoun? It's a subject pronoun. And so we'll get that, but just by its placement, it's attached to the verb, so it has to be. And we haven't actually, you know, because we did learn the third person possessive, which would be du, like du tla, du wak, du shady, right? So you were saying his or her things, right? But there's another one that appears in verbs, which is du, and that means somebody, right? And so Tlingit has these things. They're called indefinite pronouns. There's two of them. There's a human and a non-human. And English doesn't really have these, but you can still come up with something close, which is just generally, so if you say ye du wasap would be somebody, people is a good way to think of it instead of somebody or people. So basically what you're saying is the verb happens. People do that verb, right? Not just anybody specific, just people in general. So what you're saying is Yechettu wasak. Yechettu wasak. People call me this. Chone yechettu wasak. That's what people call me. So then, if we got over here. So these two are having a conversation. We are watsik. We're talking to Cha. We're trying to figure out what everybody's name is. And so we discovered what... so we were asked by Chat what our name is. And then we were asked by Chat what his own name is. And now Chat is going to ask us the name of that one over there, which is Yai.
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 Wasatu wasak.
Wasatu wasak.
Wasatu wasak.
Wasatu wasak.
Yai. You do. Yai. Ye do wasak.
Yai. Yedu wasak.
Yai. Ye do wasak.
Yai. Yedu wasak.
Yai. Ye do wasak.
Yai. Yedu wasak.
And now this one is pretty handy to know because you can talk about what all kinds of different things are called. Because this is also the way you would ask for what is something called in Tlingit, right? So you could say wasatu wasak table, right? If you wanted to say Tlingit einach at the end, wasatu wasak table Tlingit einach, and then you're asking somebody, how do you call? What's a table called, right? So this is how you ask for the names of certain things. Later, we'll learn a longer phrase, which is sort of saying, how do you say this? And then you'd have a phrase or a sentence afterwards. But for now, it's very handy. And we'll see a little bit later on, you can also throw kinship terms at the end or other things like that. So you could say, Wasatu wasak ikla. What's your mother's name is basically what you're asking with that. Okay, so we've got chat, the zero pronoun, right? So there's a zero pronoun there, which means him, her, or it. So jumping to the next page, 57. There's another way to say your name. When people learn their introduction, there was this sort of thing where people would just learn this phrase, ayachat. So you'd say, Chone ayachat, shukachati ayachat, shkut ayachat, yeshit ayachat, shkakwe ayachat. And so people would work through their introduction. And if you speak Tlingit, you understand what they're saying. But what they're literally saying, running through those things, instead of using Tlingit grammar and sort of learning how to talk about these things from a Tlingit perspective, they're learning a very short thing that they can repeat. And then, they are saying a bunch of other things, my name, my clan, my moiety, where I'm from, my clan house. But if you were to literally go through those, Chone ayachat, that makes sense. I'm Chone. Shukachati ayachat. Okay, I guess so. But that's saying I am Shukachati. But there are other people who are Shukachati. There's a better way to say that. Shkagwe ayachat. I am Skagway. Now that one doesn't really make sense because I'm not Skagway. Yeshit ayachat. No, because I'm not the Raven House, right? And so, what we're trying to do is learn a more diverse way to introduce yourself. So there's another way to say what your name is. If everybody else is saying Yechettu wasak, and you want to sound a little bit different, you could say Aya achsaye. Aya achsaye. So the two ways. Watsich Yechettu wasak. Watsich aya achsaye. Watsich aya achsaye. Watsich Yechettu wasak. Okay, and then so let's just keep going. Okay. Gleit ka. Gleit ka. Enach. Enach. Gleit ka enach. Gleit ka enach. So now we'll switch to caribou. So this is how you would tell someone your English name. And you could say Yupik Cheinach. You could say anything could be switched to Italian Cheinach, Swahili Cheinach, whatever you wanted to put in. And then, I don't know if we've covered enough of this stuff yet, but is there anything you recognize in that Cheinach? Oh yeah, so Tlingit Cheinach, it's on there. So everybody point at your mouth. Say ach eh.
Ach, eh,
Ach eh.
ach, eh,
Ach eh.
ach, eh,
Everybody point at this caribou's mouth. Du eh.
du, eh,
Du eh.
du, eh,
Du eh.
du, eh,
So it means a mouth or an opening, right? Like the doorway is chawush. A cup would have a mouth, a cave would have a mouth. It's an opening or a mouth. Nach means through something or along something. So enach means through the mouth. And the other parts, do we know what glate means? White or snow, right? So initially it means snow, but it also can mean white. And then ka is a person. It's also a man, but it's a person. So it's interesting because Tlingit has these ungendered pronouns. So you say like huh, right? Huh, 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 huh. It's he or she. Right? And same with conjugating it. Like if I say he knows, she knows, she knows. Ausuka, 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 ausuka. So we don't have to conjugate for person. But it does have this sort of default, sort of like English, where you could say since the dawn of man, right? And that means like humans, right? Not just men. But Tlingit does the same thing. Ka, depending on how it's used, could mean it's a man, or it could mean it's a person. So in English, that's how you say English. There has been a push to change things from Gleit Ka to Inganan, which is how you would say, but it hasn't got any traction. Gleit Ka is, it's just Gleit Ka. Yeah, Snow White, late, that's hilarious.
Just mentioned my brain again.
Caribou, yechatu wasak,
caribou, yechatu wasak,
gleit kach einach.
leikach,
Caribou, yechatu wasak,
caribou, yechatu wasak,
gleit kach einach. Caribou, yechatu wasak,
leikach, caribou, yechatu wasak,
gleit kach einach. Caribou, yechatu wasak.
leikach, caribou, yechatu wasak.
And again, going back to the third person pronoun, that's a really good thing to have, because once you start speaking Tlingit and you might need this, and you're talking about something, like I could say kachanaaq hasvuti kekach inach wrangle yedu wasa, right? So I could say the Tlingit name of something, and then I just tell you what it's called in English afterwards. Because maybe as I'm talking, I think, oh, well, maybe you don't know the Tlingit name for wrangle. So then I'll tell you in English. So again, it's that ye, do, was, saw, with that third person, he, she, or it. Applies to all of us. Okay, so now we get to clan. This one can also be moiety. What should we make the caribou? It should be a raven or an eagle. Or a wolf. He's from the inland. He'll be a wolf. Perfect. Okay. I like it when I ask questions and then answer. You have no input. Wonderful. Okay. Let me check something. And you guys just jump in if you got questions. Oops. Microphones. Okay. So there's three different ways to talk about moiety. You guys know what I was saying with moiety? Right? There's two halves of a thing. So on one side you have yesh, 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 yesh. What's that do with subject kachinach?
Raven.
Yes, raven. And if you go to the inland, they call it crow. Even though that doesn't mean crow in Tlingit. Ahuesh is crow. But it's interchangeable in the inland, and it's just how it is. I need to ask more inland speakers what you would call a crow. See, like an actual bird.
Yeah, it's interesting because there really aren't crows in
There aren't that many,
Just
huh?
a few. But you see one somewhere in the country.
They'll go to Skagway, especially in the summertime. Shit the hay and Ahuesh. And then they push all the ravens out of town. It's crazy. Just like tourists.
Are crows bigger than ravens, or what's
Small. So crows are quite a bit smaller, and the way you tell the difference, they have a smaller beak. They tend to have less vocal range. Like ravens make all kinds of different crazy sounds, and crows, so they have a more limited sort of vocabulary. And then they also, the difference I've seen is they tend to sort of move in larger packs. A murder of crows, I think they call it. And then the ravens tend to be pretty solitary, go in pairs and stuff. They'll certainly hang out a whole bunch, but they don't these big nests. Every year, like right around May or April, I see the ravens in Skagway, and they all fly up into the mountains. Have their babies up there.
Do you know what a grackle is?
Huh?
A grackle?
Uh-uh.
It's even smaller than a crow. They have them. I think they're coming up north. I mean, they're making their way up north.
Really?
Because I think they came from Mexico, and now they're up in like Oklahoma, and they're like even further on the crow end of the spectrum. They're just like they just purely mimic cell phones now.
Oh, really?
And there's a ton of them though. They'll make the power lines sag. There's so many of them.
Huh.
They're called grackles.
Grackles? Check that out. Come up with a Tlingit name for it.
Yes.
Grackles pretty fun. Okay. So now if you're on the coast, you would also say, so that's one side, yesh. The other side is ak, 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 ak. And if you go inland, it's qunch, 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 qunch. So he's going to be the wolf clan. So the same thing, when you're speaking English, you would say, in the inland, you'd say crow clans and wolf clans. And on the coast, you'd say raven clans and eagle clans. Okay. So again, we are caribou. We're all subscribing to his clan system. Qoj nachatzati. Qoj nachatzati. Qoj nachatzati.
Qoj nachatzati.
Qoj nachatzati.
Qoj nachatzati.
Ak nachatzati.
Ak nachatzati.
Yesh nachatzati.
Yesh nachatzati.
So we've learned a little bit about this verb yati, right? Where did we hear that one?
Wasai.
Wasa'yati, right? And yati means to be, right? And it's usually like to be a certain way, right? So wasa'yati, how you doing? How you be? This one is the same verb root, ti. Classifier changes to sit. And in this case, it means to be a member of a group. And whatever that, if we look back, so na means a clan or a nation or a tribe. So you could say de ki na, and that's the Tlingit word for hiding. They're out to sea. The one's far out to sea. But it can also mean a clan or a group. So then you've got yesh na chatzati. So that at the end is saying what the group is. So for example, I guess he'll be, what clan should he be? An inland wolf clan.
Ishkutan.
No, it's gotta be wolf clan.
Oh, right. Daktawedi.
Okay. We had Yenyedi and Daktawedi. We'll go Yenyedi. Okay. So to say Yenyedi, so the clan is Yenyedi. Yenyedi. So now we're gonna put the underline X at the end to say that's the group. What that underline X does, it says this is the group, because there might be all kinds of other things going on in there. So it'd say Yenyedi. Chatzati. And when we get the underline X sort of two in a row, you just get this little, like it's Yenyedi Chatzati. For me, it kind of still goes, but it could stop. Like there's a ring still there. Yenyedi Chatzati.
Yenyedi Chatzati.
Yenyedi Chatzati.
Yenyedi Chatzati.
And if this salmon is Ishkitan, how would we say that? Oh, Alan, let's just practice it. Ishkitan.
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 How would you say that?
Ishkitan Chatzati.
Ishkitan Chatzati. Right? So whatever, and that could be anything. That doesn't have to just, it's not just limited to clans. So here again, you could say Tzutzchan Chatzati, or you could say Simshian Chatzati, Dekinach Chatzati, Yupik Chatzati. And then you got the Chat there. So you could take the Chat out of there and fill in other pronouns if you wanted to. Right? So then the other one is, again, the third person could become very powerful. And then you could say, Ho'achati Wochsati. He or she is a teacher. So there's all kinds of different nouns that could go into there. That's sati, to be a member of some group, to be part of that group. Agree? Okay. So once we've started the introduction, we want to just try and avoid saying chat a whole bunch of times, right? Because it'd be like if you stood up and you're like me, you know, if you see someone who talks like that, I get it, it's okay. So the thing with Tlingit is sort of like once we sort of stated what we're talking about, we don't have to keep saying that thing. Everybody knows, right? Once I stood up and I said, Chish, I'm talking about myself. There's no need to keep saying chet. So now I can just start throwing a bunch of information in there until I'm sort of done with that thought. So the other thing is when we think of being a child of a clan, what does that mean? Anybody know?
That's your dad's.
Yeah, so this is your father's clan. So so we're Yenyedi, and our father is Ishkitan. So then we'd say Ishkitan Yedi.
Ishkitan Yedi.
Ishkitan Yedi.
Ishkitan Yedi.
Ishkitan Yedi.
Ishkitan Yedi.
My father was Dutch. I can say Dutch Yedi. Filipino Yedi. Anything Yedi. So it can be a clan, and if there's no clan, it could just be some, ethnicity or some cultural sort of group as well. Whatever your dad is. In Tlingit, it's really important to recognize what your father is as well. Those are the ones, so when you hear Tlingit songs and they're calling out something yetki, which is children, it's the plural form of yedi, then, those people who, so they say, in the song, that doesn't mean all the qanachtedi stand up. That means people whose fathers are qanachtedi stand up. So there's a lot of times when you get called out in these love songs to really dance for your father's people. And sometimes there's clans where you could just call out a whole bunch of different ones. But there's a bunch of these love songs they're just already in there. So you know that there's a certain part where you're going to have to start hooting and hollering for your dad's people. Okay, so now let's say Yai is Qanach Teidi. Who's making Qanach Teidi? Everybody say Qanach Teidi.
Qanach Teidi.
Qanach Teidi.
Qanach Teidi.
So if that's we're what's it? That's our dad. That's our grandmother. That's her dad's mom, and she's Qanach Teidi. So we'd say Qanach Teidi Dachkhan.
Qanach Teidi Dachkhan.
Qanach Teidi Dachkhan.
Qanach Teidi Dachkhan.
So it's a matrilineal clan system. So we're saying when we say what clan we are, it's what our mother is, and what her mother is, and her mother, her mother, her mother. So we don't have to say you're the grandchild of your own clan. That's the same. Because it's just follow the mother's lineage. That's just a given. But the Dechkhan would be your mother's or father's clan, or it could be your father's mother's clan. Or if you just keep going back farther too, when you start to get into it's just saying I'm connected to these clans through my lineage. And there's a lot of people who can go back, 4 or 5 generations with all of this clan information. And then let's say Caribou's mother is an eagle. And then Caribou's mother's father, who is Shukach Adi. Everybody say Shukach Adi.
Shukach Adi.
So when you're talking about this particular term, you're usually talking about mother's father. It's going into a pretty specific area. That specific group is called Dakanuchu.
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 So there's this term da, which means around. This other term ka, which means on or a horizontal surface. So da ka means like around the outside of something. And we see it a lot in like dakahiti. We're going to see that quite a bit for store or bank or all these different things. And the other place we're going to see here is dakanuch. So nuch means a shell, like the shell around a crab, the shell around a mussel or a clam or an egg. The way that this has been explained to me is that this is the people that protect you, and you recognize them in public speaking. It's also been explained to me that it's like an eggshell as well, so it can break. So this, you have to be careful with these clan relationships. So these are the ones you're always very overly respectful to. You can't really be overly respectful, but you're especially respectful to your clan opposites in Clinking. You have a different relationship with them than you do with those who, if you're on the eagle side, or the Qutb side, your relationship differs sometimes, and not necessarily on an individual level, but when the public is there. But also, it's in terms of what you call people. Because nowadays people want to know the words for friend and these other things, but a long time ago it was a clan-based relationship, more than just you're my friend or you're not my friend. Okay. So we'll say Shukachadi. Ayah. Achtakanuchu. Shukachadi ayah achtakanuchu. Shukachadi ayah achtakanuchu. So we're getting the ayah, and there's other instances where you will get awe in there. And then there's another way you could say Shukachadi achtakanuchu sati. Shukach adi achtakanuchu sati. Okay, so we're going to invent a clan house, no offense to anybody, but we'll invent a house that caribou is from. Let's call it Watsik. Keep it easy. So we're Watsik, we're Yanedi. Watsik Yedu Wasak.
Watsik Yedu Wasak.
Hanakahiti.
Hanakahiti.
Watsik Hit Yedu Wasak.
Watsik Yedu Wasak.
Hanakahiti.
Hanakahiti.
Watsik Hit Yedu Wasak. Hanakahiti.
Watsik Yedu Wasak. Hanakahiti.
So we're getting these long ones. We're gonna try not to drift into the atmosphere towards the but so here we got Yedu Wasak, right? It is called, or he or she is called. So you get the name of it, Yedu Wasak, whatever it is. Ha Nakahiti. Ha is our. That's a pronoun we haven't looked at yet. So when we've been doing these little pronoun triangles, first person, second person, third person, we can sort of make a little Star of David type thing and just say first person plural, second person plural, third person plural. All right, so instead of going me, you, he or she, now we also go us, y'all, that. So that's the next step we're also going to start to look at. We'll start to look at these and look at kinship and continue to explain what we can do with the language. So you can also say it a short way. Watsik aya hanakahiti.
Watsik aya hanakahiti.
Watsik aya hanakahiti.
Watsik aya hanakahiti.
So here's caribou's mother, it's a salmon. It's chag. So you're going to say achkla,
Achkla.
achkla,
Achkla.
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 This is with a TL high-toned A, then another A. It's not achkla, although when we get fewer and fewer Tlingit language speakers, we get claw instead of claw. It's a very subtle difference, but it's a big deal because that sound does not exist in Tlingit. So, I like to just sort of like do the screaming eagle talons and say, claw! And then do the little baby signs, claw. So claw scratches your eyes out, claw rocks you to sleep. Claw. So now to say what something's name is. Yedu wasak achkla.
Yedu Wasak. Achkla.
Yedu wasak achkla.
Yedu Wasak. Achkla.
Yedu wasak achish.
Yedu Wasak. Achish.
Yedu wasak achish.
Yedu Wasak. Achish.
So now you can say any name, Yedu wasak, and a kinship term. So this is again allowing you to talk about lineage and yourself, because as you get to know people, they want to know who you are. So, and this is the way you could do that. And you can also say you're talking about somebody, and you could say, not Yedu wasak to ish. His father is named Tuna. Name, Yedu wasak, kinship term, or noun, or whatever it is. There's another way, and this is a different type of verb. You'll see that the end changes a little bit. But so you could say, so there's Yai, here's Watsik, there's Chat, there's Chak. We're establishing their relationships. There's a caribou. His mother is a salmon. His father is an eagle. What did I say? Should be a chart. His father's mother is Yai, a whale. Let's say caribou's father's father is Taway. Taway. But unfortunately, Taway has passed away. So we'd say, Taway ye du sagen achlish.
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 So when you say that ye du sagen, you're saying not called that anymore. So as soon as you say that, speakers of Tlingit know that you're talking about somebody who's passed. So there's ways to say like I'm from or where you're from, but in this case we're just going to say it's a short, sort of a brief introduction. You're already talking about yourself, so you just run through this list of other items. For example, let's say yesh nachatzati shukach adi kag one time yeti chadak tawiti chad yesh hit yedu asak hanak hit kut juan juno chechat yeti. So that's how I would do like an introduction. So as far as how many times I said myself or used that pronoun was really very few. So I'd say that's my name. Yesh nachatzati, I'm a raven. And sometimes you want to do that just to say, because not everybody knows, we'll look at a big list of clans this week as well. Not everybody knows what all these different clans are. So sometimes it's good to just throw that raven or eagle or wolf right in the front. So, but then I could just say shukachati. I don't have to say anything in addition to that, just the clan. I'm still talking about myself, I'm just specifying. And then I could say, still talking about myself, it's obvious that I have to keep saying ayachat. And then our clan house is called the Raven House. We're the ones in Chilku. I don't have to say, I could say, alright, let's just look. So they're inland, so we'll say dakka.
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 Dakka Kwan.
Dakka Kwan.
Dakka Kwan.
Dakka Kwan.
And that's saying the people of a certain region. So you have clans, within clans there are houses, but the clans live in certain regions. So Tlingit would be like the nation, the Kwan would be like the state. So you've got Kwan, which is this area that we're in, people of the Little Lake. Kwan, getting down to the south side of Juneau, parts of Douglas, and also all the way up the Taka River. And then the people of the salmon, King Salmon Code, if I understand. So Kwan, and then if we won't be more complicated. It's not really. And the next one is where you currently live. Because as far as the Tlingit sense of identity, is if someone says, where are you from? Right? If I lived in Tucson, Arizona, and I was speaking Tlingit with someone, if I lived on Mars, I'm starting speaking Tlingit, where are you from? Even if I lived on Mars, I'd say, I'm from Chilku. That's where my name comes from. And this is a really interesting thing, because you could be born in Huna, lived there your entire life. If your name is from Angoon, that's where you're from. When you're speaking Tlingit. Because this is the other thing with Tlingit is we believe in reincarnation. So if you get a name, you also inherit if someone else had that name, you inherit a lot of their things. Not like their possessions, but you inherit the lineage. And so there was a guy, Charles DeWitt, lived in Haines, and when I would see him, he was in his 80s, he'd say, Achsani, he'd call me his uncle. Because his uncle was my namesake. That's who I am to him. And that's a really interesting thing. The other thing is, say if I'm Khune and I go and I just wreck a bunch of stuff, like I mess up a whole bunch of clan relationships, I do a bunch of stuff that offends my opposite clan, and then if I died off, and then someone else got that name, they're like, oh man, yeah, fix it. You really messed up. So you also inherit some of those things. So this says where you're at. So the first, we've learned a locative today. The locative was, and that's with the sati verb, to be a member of that group, sati. And it could be a career, it could be, let's say, now tatir sati, he's a drunk. It could be all kinds of, it could be qualities, it could be all kinds of things. This one is going back to the yati verb, same verb root, but now we're going to put onto something, and then yayit, and that's to say where you live, right? So where does the what say? Okay, odd plane. Let me say odd plane.
Odd plane.
Odd plane.
Odd plane.
Acting. Yes, it was soft. Okay, so we're gonna say odd plane yechayati.
Odd plane.
Going up on the chat. Odd plane.
Odd
plane. Yechayati. Odd plane yechayati.
Odd plane.
Juno yechayati.
Juno.
Mars yechayati. So then you could take the chat out of it, and you're talking about he or she, right? So you could say Seattle yeyeti ach ish. My dad lives in Seattle. All right, we didn't get to the last two. And tomorrow we'll do your guys' nouns. We'll do. We'll go over this stuff again a little bit quicker, and we'll start getting into the clans. We'll list a whole mess of clans to look at. And then later in the week, maybe next week, we'll start with the kinship. Cheesh, which, yeah.